G'day again, team. We continue our journey through our Stage 2 content and working our way through our Essentials book. So still in topic 2. In particular, we'll be looking at about 2.4 today, training principles. Okay, so training principles are the things that you would consider when developing a program. So not just going, we're doing this for the sake of it, actually looking at the theory behind it and understanding why we would be doing something. So a couple of the training principles that we focus on. One concept called progressive overload. Now, as the name suggests, progressive means, hey, we slowly build it up, and overload means, hey, going over the top, overloading the body. So we will slowly overload the body. As we've got there on the slide, body adapts to stress. So whatever it may be, whether it be running, weights, whatever, our body will adapt to it over time. So for example, if every morning we got up and we went for a 2K run, right? If we kept the same pace every time, to begin with it might be hard. Eventually our body is going to adapt to it and then it will become quite easy. Now that's okay, but if we want to continue to see improvement, we need to continually stress our body. As that second point here indicates, fitness occurs when a body is stressed beyond a normal load. So that 2K run example, after, whether it be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, our body will become adjusted to that, and that would be considered a normal load. So for us to continue to get fitness, we would need to stress our body beyond that. So we might do that by trying to run faster, so at a higher intensity, or maybe run further. So as the body adapts, or adjust, a greater load is needed, whether it be through weights, distance, whatever it might be. Okay. Again, our little definition book that you might be using, you might want to scribble this definition down. Progressive overload, progressive increase in training workloads, whether it be intensity, frequency, duration, weight, over a period of training program as the body adapts to the training load. So, progressive overload, how can it be achieved? We already spoke about distance. So we were running that 2Ks, it might be a case of, okay, we're now going to try and run further. We run 3Ks, and then once our body adjusts to that, we then work on trying to run 4Ks, 5Ks, so on. That's exactly what people that are trying to run a marathon do. They will progressively overload. So they might run at the same pace, but they're increasing the distance over their training program. The difference is they might start off with an 8K run and then progressively overload to a 10, then to a 15, then to an 18. Okay. We can also incorporate progressive overload with time. Right. Now time might be in terms of we want to try and work quicker, so at a higher intensity, that same 2Ks. All right, I've been doing it in 10 minutes, now I'm going to try and run 2Ks in 9 minutes. Or we could do it in terms of time with recovery. So for example, we might be doing interval training. I'm going to run 10 100-metre sprints. So I do a 100-metre sprint and then I give myself a 30-second recovery. 100-metre sprint, 30-second recovery. 100-metre sprint, 30-second recovery. To progressively overload the body, I might reduce my recovery time. So instead of having 30 seconds, I might only give myself 25. So it's less time for our body to recover, so it will actually be harder. Harder is good because it stresses the body. Stress the body, we're going to see some benefits. The reps, we could increase the reps, whether it's weight, right, or whether it's, as I just spoke about, intervals and sprints. Frequency, so might be I have 3 training sessions a week, okay, I'm going to up it to 4 training sessions a week. Right. Resistance would be weight, range of motion, might be flexibility. So these are all different ways where we can just incorporate progressive overload. Now you might do a combination. Again, that 2-kilometre example. It might be to begin with, you spend the first 2 weeks running that 2 kilometres. You then might spend the next 2 weeks, as I said, instead of running it in 10 minutes, trying to run it in 9 minutes. And then in 4 weeks' time, you might go, okay, I'm now going to try and run 2.5 Ks in that 9 minutes. So now I've increased the distance. So you could incorporate a couple into them. So that's progressive overload. Specificity. Definition. Again, for your little definition book if you want to keep it. Process of replicating the characteristics of an activity in training to receive the benefits. So specificity, quite simply, is making the training or the activity specific to what it is we're trying to do in the game. So for an example, you might say, okay, as a netball goal shooter, there is no point them doing a 15-kilometre run. How often in a game does a netball goal shooter run 15 Ks? Never. So you might go, okay, if I want them to do some running, what sort of running might I get them to do? And you might go, I'm going to get them to do 20-metre sprints, because that's certainly a lot more specific to the position of goal shooter, where they make lots of short, high-intensity, repeated leads. Could be things like that. If you're getting them in the weights room, you think, okay, well, what weights can I get them to do? Squats. Would squats with a bar and some weights on them be a good thing? Or you go, hang on, what does a netball goal shooter need to do? They need to jump straight up to get a rebound, vertical power. So squats would certainly help. Okay, so you can see how, whether it be running or weights or whatever, we can make it specific to the actual sport we are trying to compete. So making it specific makes it relevant. So we've just spoken about this. Okay, now in terms of making it specific, it might be the skills performed. As I said, we could look at, if we incorporate the skills performed and the fitness components, that vertical jump example is a great one. All right, we're developing muscular power and vertical jump, which are skills that's needed. It might be working the muscle groups, right? Or it might be the energy systems. So for example, if we were to have a group of footballers play indoor soccer, breaks up training, something different, but are the energy system requirements still the same? Well, if we played indoor soccer for 20 minutes, there's a fair bit of aerobic to it, just like a quarter of football. And there's going to be a lot of short, high-intensity, repeated efforts, just like football. So we could actually take these guys, middle of the season when they're feeling a little bit overtraining, put them into a game of indoor soccer, and as much as the skills don't relate, all right, the energy system does. So they're still getting their fitness requirements, all right, in a different way. So they're still getting the specific fitness requirements that they need. Okay, specificity test. Design a training program with the principles of specificity in mind for a netball centre. So in other words, this could be an activity that you might do right now. Okay, for a netball centre, what are the specific muscle groups that they use? All right, it can be a little generic in terms of we don't have to get really specific about the muscles. What skills do they normally perform? What fitness components would they use? Look at the energy systems and what's the predominant energy system. Give me an example of a fitness test and give me an example of an activity that we could do, all right, that's not a netball activity, but would still incorporate 1, 2, or 3 of these aspects. All right, so that might be a little trick for you to try. If you prefer to try a hockey goalkeeper, all right? So if you want to have a go at them, you can probably pause them because I think the answers are on the next slide. So there we are in terms of, right, if we're looking at that netball centre, main muscle groups, upper body for throwing, leg power for running, changing directions. Skills, passing and catching, fair enough. Fitness components, agility and muscular power. Right, so then we can go, energy system, netball centre is going to be mainly anaerobic, whether it be ATP or lactic acid. Fitness test, Illinois, well that ties in beautiful with the agility, or vertical jump ties in with the muscular power. Then we go, well, what activities could we do away from netball? We spoke about previously, you could be doing some squats or you could be doing some weaves. So you can see how just by doing that little activity, it's almost determined or dictated what our training program is going to be. All by just sitting down for a minute, we can put this thought into our training program and all of a sudden we've got a very relevant training program. But this is also a key, variety. When it comes to planning, we need to make sure we have variety. Right? If it's the same thing day in, day out, every Tuesday, every Thursday, whenever it is it might be, you are going to get bored. Right? The body adjusts to a stimulus, just like with progressive overload. The body adjusts to a stress. So we need to make it a bit of variety at times. Okay? Maintain training objectives and specificity through different means. The example there we've already got, that indoor soccer example. You're still going to be working mainly anaerobically, but instead of doing it on the football oval, we do it in a stadium where we're playing soccer, and all of a sudden, hey, they're going to be more engaged because it's that bit of variety. Look at the photo for those of you that might recognise. Right? Nick Naitanui, West Coast Eagles ruckman. Here he is playing basketball. Hey, it's a great means to keep up fitness, and variety keeps him stimulated. So variety is a big point as well. Now with our training programs, we need to be aware of a term, diminishing returns. Diminishing returns is quite simply when we start to see less of an improvement. So the example I've got there, biggest loser contestants. They'll go on there and the first few weeks they'll drop big numbers. They'll drop 8 kilos, they'll drop 9 kilos, 10 kilos. And then as the weeks go on, the kilos they drop get smaller and smaller, down to 6, down to 5, till they get to that week where they only drop 200 grams and they all say, oh, I'm so disappointed, I've been training so hard. Yes, but the concept of diminishing returns is what's making them lose less weight, because they're getting fitter, so the results they get are going to be smaller. No different than us with aerobic fitness. To begin with, you're going to see big improvements, and then the longer you go on, there's going to be smaller improvements because you have got fitter. Right? And to make sure we try and prevent diminishing returns, we incorporate progressive overload, so that hopefully we continually stress our body. Right? So, example, diminishing returns, we see big improvements to begin with, and then as the program goes on, it's smaller and smaller and then starts to plateau. Ideally, we'd get to a point where we are the absolute fittest we could be and, hey, would almost plateau. All right. Detraining and retraining. Detraining. So detraining is basically losing our fitness or our training. All right. So once training is finished, we lose it. So you think of Gym Junkie, for example. We go off to the gym. All right, we've done that every 2 days for 6 months. We're going to get bigger. If we then decide, you know what, it's winter, it's cold, I can't be bothered going, we'll start to see a bit of muscle mass reduce. We will lose some muscle mass. That's detraining. Same with our aerobic fitness. Once the season finishes and we stop exercising, we lose that aerobic fitness. And that is termed detraining. It occurs quicker than the gain of fitness. So in other words, pre-season, we can spend 6 to 8 weeks trying to get that aerobic fitness. 2 to 3 weeks after the season, we can basically have it lost. So we actually lose it quicker than we can gain. Okay? Aerobic fitness is lost quicker than anaerobic. Why do you think that is? Anaerobic relies mainly on stored energy. That 10 seconds explosive nature. We can still have that stored. Whereas our aerobic fitness, all right, things like our lactic threshold or our OBLA, they start to lower, therefore our aerobic fitness starts to lower. Okay, that's detraining. Retraining is, as the name suggests, retraining our body. So in other words, we've done pre-season, we've got fit, we've played our season has stopped, we've gone through detraining because we've just been lazy. We then come back to pre-season and we have to retrain our body. Okay. The good news is, if we have trained our body in a previous pre-season, for example, it is going to be quicker to retrain than start from fresh. So that's, if you look at AFL as the example, that's why they generally say to the older blokes, you don't have to come back for the first 2 or 3 weeks of pre-season, because they've done probably 8, 10 pre-seasons. Their body holds that fitness pretty well. Also, they are a little bit older and they don't want to wear them out. Whereas the younger blokes, since they are starting from, I guess, a fresher level, right, they want to get them back. So retraining will happen quicker than the initial training aspect. Okay, so there are training principles. All right? In terms of principles, P for planning. So principles go into our planning. These are our training methods. Methods are ways we can actually do the task. Now, continuous training is, as the name suggests, continuous. So it's generally considered 20 minutes onwards. 20 minutes to 2 hours, and it's more a sub-max activity. So 65 to 85% of your heart rate max. Why do we stop at 85% when we're talking about heart rate max and sub-max? Because that 85% is considered the lactic threshold. So if we're going beyond that 85%, it's considered we're working anaerobically. Can we work anaerobically for 20 minutes? No, we can't. So continuous training is 20 minutes or longer. Generally that's 65 to 85%, and yes, we are going to see aerobic benefits. Now we can divide that continuous training further if we like the lower intensity end, so more walking and jogging, or we can go the higher end. Now if we're at the higher end, that is going to improve our OBLA. Now for those that can remember, OBLA being onset blood lactate accumulation, or our lactic threshold. So if we are training at the higher end, that can improve our OBLA, our lactic threshold. Now that's a term for that is what they call threshold training, where we're training at or very close to our lactic threshold for an extended period of time, so generally 20 minutes or longer. Now that will actually see us increase our lactic threshold. And we've spoken in previous sessions about how if we improve our lactic threshold, it means we can work aerobically at a higher level. So instead of working aerobically at 85% of my heart rate max, I might be able to work aerobically at 90% of my heart rate max. Okay? So for continuous training, we need to remember the FIT acronym. FIT. So, for continuous training, we need frequency, at least 3 to 4 sessions a week. The intensity needs to be that 70 to 85% range. Time, minimum of 20 minutes, and type, whether it's whole body, whether it's running, whether it's cycling. So we need to remember the FIT, and that is something that has bobbed up in the last few exams, that sort of discussion around the FIT acronym. Another training method, so something you can do is what we call fartlek. Now many of us have probably done fartlek or heard people talk about fartlek. Quite simply, as the name suggests there, Swedish for speed play. In other words, we're playing with the speed we run at. So it's generally an aerobic submax continuous run with bursts of speed. So it might be we're going for a 5k run, but what we're going to do is we're going to sprint for 100 metres. Then we drop it back to a jog, sprint for 200 metres, drop it back. All right. So the great thing about fartlek is yes, it works aerobic and anaerobic. We go back to our continuous training. Since it is just at that same sort of level, it mainly just works the aerobic, which is fine, not a problem. But fartlek is really good for working both aerobic and anaerobic, and stimulates game situations. So many games we play, it is that short, sharp sprint, followed by jog recovery, sprint, jog recovery, sprint, walk. All right? So that's where fartlek is really good, because it does stimulate game situations. Stimulate, simulates even. Good typing. Okay, there's a little bit on here on muscle contraction. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. If you want to have a look, great. It's a little bit of extra information, and it's probably stuff that you don't need to get too caught up on in terms of a driver. Is that likely to be in the exam? All right, but you can work your way through the definitions. There's examples there as well. But as I said, I won't spend a lot of time on this just here. Alrighty, other training methods, flexibility. Now, second point here is generally what we look at flexibility as. We do it for a warm-up. But flexibility is great for two things. One, increasing the range of movement. So that's a good thing. Increasing the range of movement in a joint. The other thing it's good for is the prevention of injuries. So with those two things, if we can improve the range of movement, just look at your hamstring. If you can take your hamstring and your quad through a greater range of movement, you're likely to generate more power. You think kicking. If we've got really tight hamstrings, I'm not going to be able to get that leg too far through. Or if I can get it through further, greater follow through, I'm likely to be able to generate more power, therefore kick the ball further. Flexibility is one we can see a lot of change with quite quickly, but we need to stick with it. 3 to 5 times a week. As I said, generally we might do it as a warm-up, and that's about it. I'm standing around before my game, got nothing better to do, I've got to look like I'm doing the right thing, a bit of stretching. Now there's 3 types of stretching or flexibility work that we normally go through, and that's what we're going to look at here. So we've got static, which is probably what most of us do. Holding a muscle in full range of motion statically for a period of time. So static is quite simply just holding it still. So you can see the top example, pushing up against the wall, stretching the calves there. Right? That's generally what we will do a lot of. What people have started to see is that there's a lot of advantage in the ballistic stretching, which is actually moving. So you can see the girl there swinging her hamstring through. Right? So working it through the range of motion. The other thing is, if we look at that football example again, that is specificity in terms of that is a movement that we actually perform during the game. So we've got static, we've got ballistic or dynamic in terms of moving, and then we've got PNF, proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. Now, some people look at PNF as partner and friend, is the easy way to remember it. Right? Where, as it says here, involving contracting the muscles being stretched. So you look at the diagram there, he's holding the foot, she is actually pushing back against the hand. So she is actively engaging her hamstrings, he is then pushing back against it to give it that stretch. So the muscle being stretched is actually engaged. Right? He'd then let it relax, take it up further, relax, take it up further. So they're the different forms of stretching. And the last training method we're going to look at here is what we call plyos, or plyometric training. Now they are great for building power. Very explosive actions. So for example here you can see the guy doing, if you like, box jumps. Jumps off here, lands in between, but instead of landing, absorbing the force and then going again, he's jumping in the one motion of landing, taking off, there, jumping off, take off. Right. So it's really improving that explosive dynamic power. Again, if we want to go back to specificity, someone like a volleyballer, that'd be a great activity where they are explosive up at the net. Other training methods could include circuit training. Now circuit training is just as the name suggests, circuit, circular, where we go around to a heap of stations. Now it could be with gym equipment, where we work our way around stations, right, and we've got fixed loads in terms of weights, or it could be without any equipment, where we're doing things like push-ups, sit-ups, star jumps, burpees, whatever it might be, and we might just be doing time. Right? The good thing about circuit training is it can train a range of muscle groups, so we could be doing upper body and lower body. Right? We could be working aerobic and anaerobic. So again, if we're looking at considering that into our training program, we go, okay, let's look at rest and recovery time. To begin with, we might give, a 30-second workload with a 1-minute recovery. Progressive overload, let's pull that recovery in. So it might be 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. So there are ways that we can use all these training methods to gain benefits. But the big thing is that we come back to are planning and go, okay, what is it we are trying to get out of this session? Okay, so that's our training principles and training methods. As always, any questions, please hit me up in class, guys, and we can go through it from there. Cheers, guys.